Reflections is a program that explores the traditions that inform the history of Guyana's educational legacy. Guyana was considered the most literate country in the Caribbean, and many of our educators over the past 40 years dedicated their lives to providing the foundations that made our educational system outstanding. In this program, we will talk with veteran educators about their lives and the roles they played in the evolution of Guyana's educational system. Welcome to Reflections, a program in which we talk with veteran educators about how they were educated and their lives in education. I'm Russell Lancaster, and today on Reflections we sit with Samuel Small, former head of the Institute of Adult and Continuing Education. Mr. Small, you've been in the system for 63 and up years. Tell me how you got started in education.
I was a product of teachers. My mother taught for a while before giving it up for motherhood. My father was a teacher. When I knew him, he was a headmaster already. And therefore, the foundation for a love for teaching and education was developed. From early, I desired to teach. And after I did not come into Georgetown as a result of passing the common entrance exam, my father decided that he was going to teach me at home. Immediately, we began to prepare for the primary school certificate examination, an exam that was taken by all those children who did not pass common entrance exams and whose parents could not afford to send them into Georgetown. At that time, I lived at Ansgrove on the east coast of Demerara. So getting into Georgetown meant you had to come by train.
Okay.
It also meant that the parents who were sending the children into town without scholarships were saddled with the responsibility for providing fees, transportation, and sometimes board and lodging away from home. I did not suffer that because I remained at home. But I was prepared for the primary school certificate examination, which I took in 1939. After that, I did the pupil teacher's appointment exam in 1940. I was not immediately appointed a pupil teacher, and so I came into town and I spent a year at the Rice Marketing Board before being called for an interview at Victoria RC School, which was in the village of Victoria, not too far from Ansgrove. I was appointed, and there my teaching career began. Pupil teachers had to write annual exams. End of first year, at the end of first year, you call it an end of first year exam, end of second year, end of third year, end of fourth year. The headmaster of the school in which you taught was supposed to train you for those exams. So that apart from learning the rudiments of teaching, you also had to be very much aware that you were on the road to this teaching profession. At the end of the 4th year, you were either selected to go into the Teachers College, or you remained an assistant teacher and prepared for some other exams parallel. The 3rd class exam, the 2nd class exam, the 1st class exam. Those who went into college were prepared, were trained teachers, were trained to become teachers. After a number of years, I went into Teachers College because at that time, the Teachers College from 1928 admitted only 30 teachers per every biennially.
That's 30?
30
Okay.
biennially. And therefore mean there was a backlog of teachers in the system.
Who did not get an opportunity to go into college?
I got into college in 1952. At that time, there were 13 men and 7 women in my batch.
And this would have been the precursor to the Teachers Training College, the current Teachers Training College,
Yes.
which is the Cyril Potter College
Which is
of
it.
Education.
Yes. At that time, it was called the Government Training College of Teachers.
Okay.
Originally, it was the Teachers Training Center. That's 1928. In 1942, it was renamed the Government Training College. In 1974, when we moved to Turkine, it was named the Cyril Potter College of Education in honor of one of the most outstanding Guyanese teachers and scholars, R.C.G. Potter.
R.C.G. Potter was also a musician. I
Yes.
think he wrote a few of the national songs.
Yes, he did. Now,
And where was the training college located at that point?
the training college occupied rented premises, and it moved from several places.
In your
between nine-
recollection, where was it while you were
Well,
there?
the main building, the classroom, was in 61 Main Street. The men's hostel,
61 Main Street would be which location? Give me an idea.
Thomasburg, between New Market and Middle Street.
Okay,
on
this is
the-
close to Government House.
Yes,
Okay.
I think it's now the
Walter Roth?
Walter Roth
Walter Roth
Museum.
Museum.
That's right.
Okay.
The men's hostel was at 237 Camp Street.
Okay. And this is where?
That building now occupied by at one time was the Ministry of Labor. I'm not sure who,
Okay.
but the men occupied that building. The women occupied, their hostel was above the classrooms.
Okay.
The senior classroom was on the
On the
bottom
main-
floor.
On the bottom
The
floor.
junior classroom on the bottom floor, the senior classroom on the second
On
floor,
the second floor.
and the women's hostel
Was
at the top,
upstairs.
upstairs. Now, I must say that the teacher training curriculum did not focus only on academic subjects. Academic, professional, and social subjects. We had, for example, physical education, which was a serious subject. It wasn't only that we had to remain physically fit, but we had to learn to teach physical education. So
And you were an elementary school teacher,
I was in elementary,
which meant you had to teach all the subjects.
all the subjects.
Which
All-
included what? What were all the subjects in those days?
in schools, arithmetic, We call it English. It was English language and grammar. Nature study, hygiene or health education, religious knowledge depending on what denomination, because the churches run the schools. And because I was in a Catholic school and I became a Catholic teacher, I had to teach the catechism. But I wanted to focus on the Teachers College and to highlight the fact that life in a hostel included learning to live together in a community. This was not always easy for the men. I couldn't talk about the women, but I expect it to be the same thing.
What did it include?
It included being on time for meals, asking for permission to leave when you are supposed, even when you're supposed to go out. You had to sign a book, time book, and when you came back, you had to sign again, because you had to. This was one method of teaching you some self-discipline. Social relationships were important. You had to learn how to get along with one another. You had to play games, and you had to learn the rules of the games. You just didn't go to play cricket without being exposed to the rules of cricket, because sometimes you had to be an umpire and you had to be able to make correct decisions. At the end of a cricket match, when you return to the hostel, the captain would get the men together and they would discuss what happened on the field.
So what you're saying is that this was a comprehensive kind of preparation for teaching?
Yes, that's the point I'm making. You had, for the men, we had cricket, football, handball, and sometimes those persons who were interested in boxing, they were gloves. In fact, I remember on one occasion, my first year, two fellas who were arguing, and the resident tutor tried to settle the matter. He wasn't satisfied that they were satisfied, and so he called for the gloves and gave them. Well, one man gave up quite early.
Immediately. He didn't want it to go in that direction.
No. I'm attempting to indicate here about the all-round development. We had to do athletics. Whilst we were in college too, we were responsible for attending inter-school sports and taking an interest in as one of the judges or one of the orderlies, so that was part of your training. Very broad-based. We did music. We had our famous lecturer, Ms. Lynette Dolphin, who was very excellent and demanded that all who could sing had to sing. If you couldn't sing, then she showed you the rocking chairs. But you had to come to singing classes, even though you couldn't sing. So each person was auditioned, and apart from singing in harmony, we had choirs, we participated in music festivals, and some of us became very good singers. We attended a number of special lectures away from the college and in the college itself. I remember Mr. J.I. Ramphal, Mr. Arthur Seymour. These gentlemen featured in our extracurricular activities, citizenship, literature, poetry, especially, because as you know, Arthur Seymour was very good at one of the excellent poets that we had. Another aspect that look simple, but I felt that it did do much for us. Each person had to, when he came to college at first, male and female had to have a bicycle. That meant that you had to be on time. If the rain fell, if the rain was falling, you had also to bring a coat and an umbrella. If you did not have, you would have to secure transportation by some means. But you had to be at your lectures, or if it was a lecture away from the college, you had to be there on time. There was a system of student government. And so we had representative students and we had prefects who were expected to ensure that where you were supposed to be, you were there and ready to work. Your dress was important. The men wore suits. You were given a college tie. You wore helmets or cocked hats, which was a flash, which meant that you could be distinguished at any time. The female students wore special uniforms with a badge, and they too had to be properly dressed at all times. We were always encouraged, if we had to attend any function or a lecture away from the institution, that we will go together and return together. So you could imagine you were always noticed. It kept quite a number of men in check.
I would so imagine.
It kept quite a number of men in check, so that even if you wandered away, you had to ensure that you got back to the hostel in time. As a teacher, you had to respond to the rules of the school as set out by the head teacher. In my case, because I worked in Roman Catholic schools, and particularly the third school that I worked at, Sacred Heart, which was headed by a Sister of Mercy. The atmosphere in that school was completely different from any other, I think apart from St. Mary's, and I think Carmel to a certain extent. You might say St. Rose's as a secondary school later. Discipline was maintained by the headmaster or headmistress. In the case of all three schools in which I worked, the headmaster, headmistress used the bell to great effect. As the children played in the playground before school commenced, the bell was a signal for the call of school. And at Sacred Heart, I remember very well, Sister of Mercy, the headmistress, would get to the window because the playground was behind the school, and she made one thing with the tongue of the bell. And whatever you were doing, you had to just remain frozen in place until the second bell. The second bell, you relaxed and you looked around you to see what was on the ground. You picked that up, and the third bell said that you were to move quietly but briskly to your lines, depositing whatever you picked up in the garbage can. The lines were always fixed, and you went up according to the decisions of the school, on your toes, to some music being played by the headmistress. When she thought you were fully in place, she stopped. And you stopped. You had to mark time very quietly on your toes whilst you were there until the music stopped. And she would turn and say, "Good morning, children," and you would then say, "Good morning, sister. Good morning, teachers." I think it changed because the discipline seemed to have been relaxed. What was required of children, some people might have called what I described earlier as being too military. But it served its purpose.
And the purpose was?
The purpose was to help you to recognize that on entering the building, you had to be quiet and be ready for work. You never ran into a building and continued shouting and screaming. I believe that that has been relaxed to some extent. The math question of discipline and courtesy, which were hallmarks of education in the early years, seem to have been amended. And the number of reports of violence in schools, children against children, children against teachers, teachers against children, and so on, even though some of that might have happened before, because some people would say there was more corporal punishment in those days than do exist now.